Oh hey there crew, this is your captain speaking, and today I'm turning the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse into characters. I've always had an interest in creating character designs for concepts like these. This includes the 7 Deadly Sins of course, but I will get to those some other time since that's a much bigger project. Given the background of the 4 Horsemen, I thought I'd read the most notable excerpt for each horseman to give you guys an idea of what they're based on. For some more context before I read this first part, from what I can tell, the 4 Horsemen are the first 4 seals on a scroll that brings forth the end of the world, the apocalypse, when opened. But let me actually read this first excerpt for you guys. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. First up, we have the White Rider, which I've seen interpreted as conquest, but I've also seen it mentioned as maybe representing pestilence. For anyone else who's not sure on what pestilence is, it basically just refers to a fatal disease or more like a plague. One of the sources I used for my research brought up the idea that they could closely follow each other, and since there are 2 concepts now, I thought why not make the White Horsemen twins? Where one goes, the other follows. Other than that, there are some criteria to note for the design. The White Riders must carry a crown and a bow. They must also show some sort of reference to disease, maybe even being prepped against it. I decided to give these characters very on-the-nose color names. On the left we have Ivory, the more hardened twin, and on the right we have Pearl, the gentler twin. So Ivory has half her face covered to protect against disease. She also represents the more violent side of Conquest, as she's the one carrying the weapon. She's the more practical of the twins. Pearl is Ivory's more princessy counterpart. She's the one who sits behind the Conquest, the one who will sit on the throne at the end of it all. She is a very nervous but kind-hearted ruler. Since they are supposed to represent the White Horsemen, of course their color scheme needs to be white. I kept it limited to mostly lighter colors, but still wanted to bring in some more darker colors for contrast. But here they are, the more serious Ivory and the gentle Pearl. They look so sweet together. Next up we have the Red Horseman, which coincidentally ended up being my favorite of the characters for this video. But before we get into the design, let me read their passage. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. The Red Rider can pretty easily be interpreted as war. This character needs to carry a massive sword. This just screams out knight to me, so that was the direction I took for this one. I was very excited to draw this big bombastic red knight that I named Copper. She just came out so pretty and full of personality. It was a big challenge to draw armor for once, but I think I did pretty good. I even managed to design a pretty ornate sword. I'm really happy with how that design came out. I tried to incorporate a bunch of swooping sharp shapes throughout the design so that parts of her design would resemble flames. The concept came together really nice when I brought in the yellow and red for her final color scheme. Her clothing and armor ended up being brown. I wanted to keep her color scheme nice and warm. I love how it looks, but I can't help but think of candy when I look at her. The brown colors just make me think of chocolate, while the details on the sword hilt make me think of tiny flavored meringues. I think I was just craving sugar that day and the idea just stuck in my head. Now she'll always just be the candy knight in my head, but I guess it's not that bad. But here is Copper in all her glory. I'll definitely try to use her design. But at this speed, all the OCs that I'm saving to use for later will be redheads. Just popping in to remind you to like the video, which I assume you do if you made it this far, and subscribe to join our little pirate crew. Next up, we have the Black Horseman. I'll quickly read his passage before I talk about the design. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and his rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." This rider is interpreted as famine. I named this little guy Ebony. At first I wanted to draw him carrying a pair of scales, but decided to instead have him and his pose more represent the scales. I drew him very symmetrically and had him hold orbs in his hands, weighing one against the other. After almost finishing the drawing, I decided to add things inside the orbs at a friend's recommendation. I thought having him weigh the value of food would be a good visual. An apple and some gold coins was the simplest way I could think of representing that. I intentionally made his color scheme very grey and lifeless. I couldn't make him very colorful since he is supposed to be the Black Horseman. I did bring in some lighter colors for contrast against the black, but still kept them very grey. The brighter blue is a nice way to draw attention to his face and crystal balls without overpowering the darkness of his design too much. I could have also made his skin a little warmer, but I think the greyness meshes really well with his color scheme. I just love how lifeless he looks. But here is Ebony. I was very worried about the color scheme, but I think it came out really nice. Last but not least, we have the Pale Horseman. They're also one of my favorites, but let me read this passage for you before we actually get into his details. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. This rider can pretty clearly be interpreted as Death. This rider has some authority over others. They also need to have some connection to animals or wild beasts. The mention of Hades led me to decide on a three-headed wolf anthro as a reference to Cerberus. I could have just kept his name as Cerberus, but since he has 3 heads, I wanted to give them their own names. So from left to right, we have Finn, Finley, and Finnegan. Finn being the more violent, angry one, Finley the friendly mediator, and Finnegan the shy one. Together they serve under one body and title. I drew the tails of his coat to look like flames. I decided on that pretty early, but it wasn't in my initial digital sketch, only in my sketchbook one. I almost turned them into only his tails, but I'm happy I switched back. Pale as a color scheme descriptor is odd, especially since there is already a White Horseman. I am instantly limited to not using a similar color palette to what I used for them, but I still need to make use of lighter colors. For the most part, I stuck to that sweet spot between green and blue with the colors I picked. But here are Finn, Finley, and Finnegan. I just adore how they came out. But that's all for today, crew. I hope to see you again for our next voyage. Bye bye!